Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to a view replay courtesy of Circling High Off Lemons here. He's platooned up with All In Before Arty, who we've definitely had on the channel before, but this time the focus is all going to be on Lemons in his WZ-132-1, the Tier 10 Chinese light tank. Now he isn't actually going to get to do light tank things really until towards the end of this game. And that's mainly because, well, Erlenberg. He does start off with charging up the 9-0 line along with a fair portion of his team to see if there's going to be any enemy movement at this end of the map. But both teams are pretty much doing the air quotes correct thing for Erlenberg. Neither team is really pushing across the river. Now that Batchat did, but is in some fairly strong cover, although they've managed to lose most of their hit points, so not that strong, and that is spotting damage you think would have gone to Lemons, but apparently not. Apparently that was somebody else's spotting, which is a bit unfortunate, but he does pick up this E75. From their own side, they had a T49 that pushed across and promptly ran into all of the enemy team, so you can guess what happened to them. But yeah, Lemons is sensible enough not to try doing the same thing on this side of the map. I think he did advance forward with the hope of maybe picking up another spot or maybe even the kill on the Batchat, but as it's going to be, that's not going to work out. He does, however, you know, he's clearly thinking maybe he can pick up a few more defenders. We know that E75 is there, the Type 4 Heavy's there apparently, and All In Before Arty manages to get in a little hit, but yeah, it's a bit of a static position this really. He can't push forwards, and he does spend a little bit of time trying to figure out where exactly he's getting spotted from and if it's maybe possible to advance a little bit further forward than that. But I mean, somebody's got a line of sight on one side, somebody's got you know, shots from the other side, so there's not a lot he can do, and quite sensibly he then pulls back towards his teammates, as has All In Before Arty. So now he's just trying to see if he can pick up some damage and spotting in the middle, because there's not a lot else for him to do. The enemy team has more aggressively pushed up to the water's edge, but his own team, yeah, they've just taken up the defensive positions around the hills. And so this is becoming a war of view ranges and also a war of RNG, because at this kind of stage of the game, it's just a matter of who can outspot who and whose artillery is able to land the more effective hits. And once upon a time it would have been even more RNG dependent, of course, but this is a 921 game, as you can guess by the resplendent camouflage on his light tank here. But yeah, still, even though it's not going to be the mega hits that might have happened with old style artillery, that chipping away of health, and even just, you know, if you track somebody or stun them when they're out in the open, that's still going to maybe have a not insignificant impact on the overall outcome of the game. So he's done a bit of damage so far himself, nothing huge, but landing the hit on that IS-4 at this range with the heat ammo no less. It was a little bit lucky it didn't go into like the tracks or something, but yeah, I mean, the gun on this overall is still pretty good. It's not quite as punchy as a tier 10 medium tank gun, but 390 average damage, and I think the APCR standard ammo is something like 245, 246 penetration. It's good enough for most things, but there are still going to be some targets where you do need that heat ammo. So he's not spotted himself, but All In clearly did get lit by something, so Lemons backs off just to be on the safe side, maybe wary of incoming artillery hits. And well, so far, you know, Arty's not been picking on him, but never say never. You never know when that's going to change, of course. So another bit of opportunistic damage against that Object 140, and actually picks up some spotting damage against him there. And at this point he decides to poke back up north again, I think just to see if he can't pick up something with his view range, which is, he's got to have binoculars on this. I don't know what kind of crew he's got, but if I had to guess, binoculars, maybe some vision skills. He doesn't get very far, however. He turns back when the object is spotted, maybe with the idea of, I don't know, getting into a position where he can push that guy, because if he's low enough health, it'd be a bit risky, but he could do it. But he takes a moment to take a pop at this Type 4 Heavy, who has pushed across the bridge just enough to peek out and get spotted, and actually does manage to land a penetrating hit. Again with the heat ammo, but the OPCL probably wouldn't have been very effective at that distance. So, against that target, yeah, I think that's a perfectly legitimate use of that particular ammo. He does fire a fair bit of his heat. I mean, he's... Okay, that was a pretty nasty pair of hits. He's probably not needed it for a target like the 5120. It's not the most armoured tank in the world, but you know, heat doesn't lose penetration with distance. The only real downside of it is that, of course, spaced armour can entirely negate it. So it's just, you know, if he's willing to spend the credits, then you can fire it at targets like that, but yeah, although in that case he must have hit the gun or something, because that was of course 0 damage. So that was that bat chat along with the 5120 that whacked him one there. So having let that guy get away alive was you know, not optimal but sometimes there's nothing you can do about these things. Meanwhile, the Type 5 has, for some reason, decided to advance, and maybe they just got bored and blinked first, but it's not working out for them. And although one hit didn't penetrate, the second one did, and so that Type 4 is ripe for taking out by somebody else at this point. I think actually all in before, yeah, there we go, all in before our team made a move while he was relatively unsupported. They are losing tanks themselves, though. You know, this is just a straight-up war of attrition, basically. They've got the more defensive position. It's the enemy team that's trying to push into it, but it's Erlenberg. This is what happens. You know, one team just turtles up and the other team has to try and dismantle it somehow. And in this case, it's Lemons' team that is the one that's doing the turtling, and it's the enemy team that's having to try and prize them apart, pick them apart piece by piece, but it's not working for them so far because it's just the nature of this map. Now at this point, Lemons does a risky thing. The 432 was in a somewhat vulnerable position, but he did have some backup, and they've actually now taken out the Batchat as well, and that was a valuable pair of tanks to have taken out, but unfortunately the Jagdtiger took out all in before Arty. So that's one less tank on their side now as well. But that Jagdtiger might represent an opportunity. It's very possible, given that there aren't a lot of enemy tanks left, and we know where most of those are, that this guy is isolated and alone. It's only the enemy E75 that we don't have a minimap, a current minimap marker for at the moment. So this is a little bit of a risk, but it's, you know, a very useful kill that opens up an opportunity to break through the enemy lines if he can do it. So he tracks him once, the Jagdtiger repairs, and because it's a tank destroyer versus a light tank, I mean, this is pretty nice if you're in the light tank. And he gets a retracking shot and you know, struggled a bit with his gun depression there, and then realised actually no, I can just shoot the front axle, and so now he's basically got this guy as a guaranteed kill, although that one bounced. At this point, artillery displays, you know, all the things that artillery should be doing, and actually communicates by indicating he wants to fire at the Jagdtiger, and Lemons backs off. Lets him take the shot, and so that's one less shell that Lemons has to spend killing the Jagdtiger, and leaves him with an easy low health kill. Unfortunately, he takes a hit from the GW Tiger himself in the process, so we know the GW Tiger must be down towards the southern end of the map to get that kind of an angle. He can't be up near the enemy cap circle. So that has opened a big hole in the enemy lines. In fact, there aren't really enemy lines left anymore. It's just the artillery and the two tanks down near the cap circle. So they've won the war of attrition at this point. and it's not thanks to some tanks. You know, I'm thinking particularly of that Super Conqueror, who was maybe not that useful in this match, but he's not going to be the only one that survives that doesn't have a great score. So he gets the 2-on-2 with an ammo rack. Second shot kills the GW Tiger, which is very useful to have killed the enemy arty. Not just from the fact that it's, you know, satisfying, but also artillery is more dangerous in the late game these days, if anything. It's kind of like autoloaders. Autoloaders have, of course, the burst damage to go on, but artillery can just much more reliably get splash damage these days, and when you've got a lot of low health enemies running around, that splash damage becomes more dangerous, whereas previously it was, you know, as equally RNG at the start of a match as it was at the end of a match. So he could hide behind the arty wreck here, and instead he actually jukes and gets a bounce. One of his allies gets the kill, which just leaves the T-57 Heavy left. Now that shot could have killed him. That was maybe a bit more of a risk than he needed to take. But having said that, they are running out of time. We're down to now the last minute. And you might have noticed in the chat that All In Before Arty was, you know, saying just rush them. But even so, these last couple of tanks have not been particularly active, the 183 especially. So he lands a hit, leaves the 57 Heavy on 7 hit points, and one of the artillery might have gotten the splash, but as it is, the 183 gets the final kill, and so there we go. It's a win with just about half a minute left on the clock. So, no ace tanker, which is maybe a little bit surprising given that it was over 8k combined, but still, Pascucci's high caliber, patrol duty, Confederate medal, and tank sniper. And he did get to do some scout tank things at the end, but really, it was all about Erlenberg this game. You know, that was a pretty good performance from Lemons. All In Before Arty also did pretty well. The Super Conqueror and the 183 maybe not quite so well, but still better than a good third of the team in terms of the score. But yeah, it was all about Erlenberg that game, and just how derpy that map can be. And, you know, in this case, they were able to turtle effectively enough, and Lemons was doing enough damage that they were able to win. And it wasn't just Lemons doing the damage, but, you know, there was a fair concentration on the damage counts towards the top of the team list there, which is not an uncommon occurrence. It usually is the top part of the team that's doing more. But, you know, the enemy team, the damage was fairly spread around as well, but you look at, like, the lower half of the enemy team, and some of them were not performing that well at all. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this replay, and if you did, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.